Hello everyone, welcome back to Crappy Gaming, where we take deep dives into the games that make us laugh, cry, and question life itself. Today we're tackling a masterpiece, What Remains of Edith Finch. This isn't just a game, it's an emotional roller coaster that explores family, memory, and the weight of legacy. So grab a box of tissues and maybe some existential courage, because we're diving into every corner of the Finch family story. First things first. What is What Remains of Edith Finch? Developed by Giant Sparrow and released in 2017, this game is often described as a walking simulator. But don't let that label fool you. This is storytelling in its most interactive form.
I wasn't allowed inside half the rooms.
You play as Edith Finch, the last surviving member of the Finch family, as she returns to her childhood home to uncover the stories of her ancestors. What you uncover isn't just a family tree. It's a labyrinth of tragic, bizarre, and sometimes beautiful tales.
Marked urgent. Open immediately.
The Finch house is more than just a setting. It's practically a character in its own right.
I hadn't been back since my brother.
Each room was like a time capsule, perfectly preserved to reflect the personality and story of the person who once lived there. From Barbara's 1950s Hollywood-themed bedroom to Lewis's psychedelic boat factory. The house tells a story without saying a single word. And let's not forget the architectural absurdity it is in a towering patchwork maze that feels both cozy and claustrophobic. It's the perfect metaphor for the Finch family legacy, layered, messy, and teetering on the edge.
The truth is, even after I inherited the house...
Now let's talk about the elephant in the room, the so-called Finch family curse.
But now I had questions.
Each family member meets an untimely, often bizarre demise, and these stories are the core of the game. From Molly, who imagines herself transforming into different animals, to Gregory, whose tragic tale unfolds during a bath. Every vignette feels like the blend of fantasy and pure, raw emotions. This game never explicitly confirms if the curse is real, but the ambiguity is what makes it so compelling. Is it fate? Is it misfortune? Or is it the family's obsession with their own stories that
the way I'd been dreaming about it
perpetuates this cycle? Either way, it's haunting in and of itself. Odin Finch and Dawn.
As a child,
and technically Milton, but we will get to that much later.
Put into words.
The game starts with Edith Finch on a boat heading to the Finch family home. She's heading to the house because she is the last remaining Finch, but there's a twist. She's pregnant and wants to get her family story for her child. After the boat, Edith is on the trail to her family's house as she narrates her thoughts. As she is going down the trail, she reminisces her thoughts on why her mom willed her a key and never told her what it was for. All she was told was to return to the house and see what she can find. The trail is surrounded by beautiful woods and the sounds of wildlife. As Edith gets to the house, she finds the front door locked and the key does not work, so she enters through the doggy door in the garage. As she goes through the house, it's as if the house has paused in time. Nothing has changed since the night they left. You'll see that many doors to the bedrooms are sealed off with peepholes. This is a Finch family tradition to seal off rooms of dead family members.
Like how only one
Edith enters one of the rooms that isn't sealed, finds a book that needs a key.
Or how after Lewis started working at the cannery,
she opens it and finds a secret passageway. This passageway leads to the bedroom of Molly Finch. This is the first story we see for the Finch family. I will warn you, some of these stories are intense and might be disturbing.
Nothing in the house looked abnormal.
I won't say much during these stories, so I will remain quiet so that you can witness each Finch family member's ending without interruption.
A lot of things got left behind in the whirlwind of that last night. My mom wasn't much of an optimist, but she never stopped believing that my brother Milton was alive. Edie told me once that every Finch who ever lived is buried somewhere in the library. Mom always told me to stay out of the basement, so I wasn't too surprised when the key didn't fit. Great-Grandpa Sven built a music box for Barbara, along with the rest of the house. Even the fireplace had a story. Edie told me the table was still a wreck from the night we left. It was like a bomb had gone off, killing everyone but sparing the furniture. My mom was the only one of us who could imagine Great-Grandma Edie living in a nursing home. After Milton disappeared, Mom sealed up all the bedrooms. Then Edie retaliated and drilled peepholes. My Grandpa Sam spent 7 years sharing a room with his dead brother, Calvin. As a kid, I just assumed every house had peepholes and sealed rooms you weren't allowed inside of. The last time I was in Edith Sr.'s room, I was 10 and she was painting my portrait. Molly always seemed like a girl I could imagine being friends with, if she hadn't died in 1947. I spent a lot of time playing in Great Uncle Walter's room. I think my mom sometimes regretted not sealing it up. Lewis told me there were secret passages, but I never believed him. Turns out, my mom was really good at keeping secrets. Now it was time to find out what my mom had been afraid of. Reading this, maybe it sounds like I had a plan, but I had no idea what was behind that door. Just like I had no idea where all this was gonna lead.
I feel as if Molly's story is a perfect start on how we experience the deaths of each of the Finch family members, because it can show how sad yet beautiful each moment is.
December 13th, 1947. Dear Diary, I'll be gone soon, but I wanted to tell somebody about what's gonna happen. It started when Mom sent me to bed without dinner. I woke up and I was starving, so I looked around for something to eat. The gerbil food was dry, but I didn't mind it. My Halloween candy was all gone. I kept eating and eating. I ate a lot of things that night. Then I heard chirping outside my window. It was a barn swallow going back to her nest. I reached out for her. And suddenly, I was a cat. I tried to be quiet, but the bird was really scared. Mom and Dad didn't even look at me. I jumped and I almost got her. I could tell she was getting really tired. Now I was up in the big tree. I promised Dad I wouldn't climb it anymore. All I cared about was eating that mommy. I gobbled her up. And suddenly, I was an owl. First, all I heard was the wind. Then I heard little teeth nibbling in the grass. Rabbits. I imagined his face looking up and seeing mine through my talons. I swallowed him up, and I didn't chew one bit. Then I flew off to find something bigger. A mama rabbit. She was almost too big to carry. I started choking, but I couldn't stop eating. And suddenly, I was a shark. I rolled off a cliff and into the ocean. Now, I was hungrier than ever. I wanted fat, juicy seals. off her flipper, and it tasted really good. Grabbed on tight. When I was so hungry, I jumped out of the water. When I opened my eyes, everything had changed. Now I was a monster, and I smelled people everywhere. I was big, but I moved real quiet. To stop, but also I didn't.
His belly was rusty, his belly was rusty, his belly was rusty.
last passenger, I was still hungry. And across the water, I smelled something new. Something I had to have, so I swam towards it. I slithered onto the sand, and the good smell went into an old pipe. I got closer and closer. All of my stomach started growling. And suddenly, I was me again. I held my breath for a long time, but I couldn't hear anything. I think it's waiting for me to fall asleep. But it's not going to wait much longer. It needs to feed, and we both know I will be delicious.
I'm not sure if I believed all of that, but I'm sure Edie would have. This will be obvious later, but my mom never told me any of these stories.
But as we leave Molly's room,
Edie would
Edith heads
have,
out the
but Mom
window
didn't
to get
for
to the
me
next
in the
room,
past.
which is her great-grandma Edie's room.
Though, when we adopted a stray kitten,
Grandma Edie is who Edith
was
is
the
named
one who
after, in
named
case you
Molly.
couldn't tell.
I spent a lot of time in great-grandma
You're probably
Edie's
wondering why
room.
we don't see Edie's death in her room. We'll go over her death
When
later.
Edie told people Sven was killed by
But
a
as we're going
dragon,
through Edie's room, we find
she could
various
also have said he
pictures,
was
news
building a dragon-shaped
headlines,
slide that collapsed. She could have, but she didn't.
models, displays, various things like that, because she was the one that would make the pictures we see. But also while we're going through,
One summer, they
we see
evacuated the island, but
pictures
Edie
of how
refused to
her
go.
father, Odin
For a
Finch,
few
died.
weeks, she was a
His death is
celebrity.
nothing spectacular,
I
it
hadn't
just
thought
shows
of myself
pictures
as
on
the
how
Edith
he
Jr.
passed,
for a long,
and that's a brief
long
history on the
time.
Finch family curse.
Edie gave a big interview about a mole man living under the Finch house. My mom was furious. Edie knit me a new pair of gloves every year, just in time to replace the old ones. Louis died a week before we left, but Edie had already started to memorialize him. Her room was like a museum. For 500 years, the Finches have been famous throughout Norway for their fortune and misfortune. Odin Finch buries the latest victims of the family curse, his wife Ingeborg and their newborn son, Johan. On January 7th, 1937, he set sail with his family and his house, hoping to leave the curse behind. But 40-foot waves off the coast of Washington send the house and Odin to the bottom of the sea. Odin's daughter Edie, with husband Sven and baby Molly, step ashore on their new home, Orcas Island. Odin Finch is the first to be buried in the new family cemetery. His daughter Edie is already dreaming of a new Finch house.
As you saw from those pictures, the Finch family curse has been happening
Whatever's
for a
wrong with
very,
this family,
very long
it
time.
goes back a
Long
long
before
ways.
Odin, and much longer before Edie. We see that Odin Finch wrote several books about death and curses, and family curses. We also see that the key
Even in her
that
90s,
Edith's mom
sometimes
left
Edie
her
seemed a lot
comes in
younger
handy
than my
once
mother.
again once she enters the bathroom. And as you'll see, this bathroom is very bright, as we'll say. This bathroom is very unique because it stands out, and you can tell that it was
hay left on the house was the pink
the
bathroom.
product of a Finch family member.
There's a secret in this bathroom. It's in the last place you would look. It isn't in the cupboard. It's hidden in this book. Sven gave Sam an old camera he'd refurbished.
As we head out of the bathroom, we see that each section of this house, down to the passageways, is unique and has a flair and some sort of inspiration from other Finch family members.
It was clear my brother Milton had been here before me.
We also end up in the room of Calvin and Sam. As you heard earlier, Calvin and Sam were twins, but unfortunately Calvin did not live very long.
I knew Grandpa Sam had a twin.
We are about to witness Calvin's end,
And that he never
and
talked
as I
about
said
it.
before, I will remain quiet during these
I guess
sections,
my grandpa didn't like
and I will
history
give my
any more
opinion
than
on
my
them
mom did.
after.
How I Want to Remember My Brother by Sam Finch. The thing I remember is that when he made up his mind, that was it. My brother said he'd die before he ate another mushroom, and he did. At Barbara's funeral, we swore we'd never be afraid again, and he wasn't. I think Calvin always wanted to fly.
Calvin, dinner's ready. Coming.
But that day, he finally made up his mind to do it. I told him going around was impossible. Maybe if I hadn't said that,
Calvin, I'm not gonna tell you again.
maybe if the wind hadn't picked up, then maybe he'd still be here. But I doubt it. I think he'd already made up his mind. That's what I want to remember about my brother. The day he made up his mind to fly. And he did.
Calvin's story felt strange
Calvin's
to
death
me.
is told in
When I
a
was
truly
younger, I
beautiful
remember
way
trying to do
through
the
the
exact
words of his
same
brother.
thing.
As we can tell that even though they didn't get to see each other for very long, they still were very close. We also see
After the
the
funeral,
true impact that
roped
each
off
death
Calvin
has on the
out of the room.
family. Because Calvin's side of the room is frozen in time, while you can see Sam's side of the room
Mom said Grandpa Sam enlisted at 18,
changed
never
drastically
set
to
foot
the
in the
point
room
where he
again.
eventually got his own room, so he didn't have to share the room with the memories of his deceased brother.
The passages were a pretty tight fit. They'd obviously.
I apologize for
smaller
messing up the
hands
flow
and
of the video. I did forget to mention that there are several scenes in this game where I will have to mute the music. So if the audio sounds weird, that's why, and I deeply apologize for that. If there's a way I could get around the copyright, I would.
Growing up, I always thought of Barbara as a child star.
we'll see that Barbara's section is told in a very unique way because it is told not through her eyes, but through a comic book. This is the only story that is told in this manner, and I very much appreciate the fact that they gave hers a little flair and changed it up. But, as I said before, I will remain quiet so you can experience these
about Barbara's death,
as they should be
Edie
experienced.
saved this one.
Old Jack here with another ghastly tale inspired by America's most unfortunate family. I'm calling it The Surprise Ending of Barbara Finch. As a child star, Barbara was famous for her scream. Now at 16, she was all washed up. A has-been. But in a lucky break, she'd been asked to perform her signature scream at a local convention for monster movie fans. It was just the boost her career needed. Unfortunately, her scream hadn't aged well.
Getting better. I think you just need the right motivation.
Her biggest fan and current boyfriend, Rick, was about to demonstrate when...
Now that was a great scream.
It was Barbara's father, Sven. He'd slipped into a table saw and had to be rushed to the emergency room. So Barbara got stuck babysitting her youngest brother, Walter. Her convention comeback was cancelled.
Okay, I'm hearing frustration, but I'm not hearing terror. What if I tried...
A gang of hoodlums in Halloween masks have been terrorizing Orcas Island tonight. Police are urging residents to...
That came from the basement.
You're right! Also, I loved your delivery on that. Why is your basement door locked?
Because my dad likes making puzzles and secret passages. There's a key hidden in the music box. The secret is to keep winding and winding until finally the key pops out.
Thanks, babe. I'll be back in a sec.
20 minutes later, Rick hadn't returned. So Barbara went to look for him, right on cue. She reached for the music box. And as she wound the key, she listened for Rick, but the house was silent.
Rick?
Barb, relax. I was just trying to scare you to help you find your scream.
Well, I'm not scared, Rick. I'm furious.
Then act furious. All I'm getting from you now is that you're hurt and confused and you're...
She threw him out, but she kept a little something to remember him by.
Barb, have you seen my other crutch?
And she was still holding it when she fell asleep watching the Late Picture Show. Hours later...
Barbara! Walter, what's going on up there? Ah! Okay, I'm coming up, but if this is a trick, you're dead, Walter.
Walter vanished, but his bedside radio was still on.
Orcas Island police described the man as 6 feet tall, with a steel hook for a hand. Residents are urged to lock all doors and windows and notify the police of any suspicious activity.
Barbara turned, saw the hook man, and was speechless. He was quite smashing. He couldn't get enough of Barbara.
Okay, Barbara, there's gotta be
That night, she played her part beautifully. Molly's door hadn't been opened in years. The hinges groaned. He wasn't moving, but she sensed the story might not be over yet. The hookman had vanished. She listened for his breathing, but all she heard was... door was dying to speak to young Barbara. At the door, she heard whispering. It was coming from inside the house.
Oh dear.
The monsters had come to surprise her. For Barbara, it was a dream come true. Then she saw what kind of monsters they were, and she realized what was about to happen. She was going to be famous. And with her final breath, Barbara Finch gave the performance of her life. I wasn't there myself, but I hear Barbara was magnificent. Poor girl. She had a taste for stardom. But unfortunately, so did her fans. Of course, the police blamed it all on poor Rick, who disappeared the same night. And little Walter? Hiding under his bed the whole time. He took it all pretty hard, but that's another story. As for Barbara, tucked inside the music box is all they ever found of her. Her ear. Now that's what I call a real eerie tale.
Edie told me all Barbara wanted was to be remembered, as absurd as that comic was. Maybe what Edie saw was a happy ending.
As I said, we see that Barbara's death was told in a very unique way through a campy horror comic that's inspired by Tales from the Crypt.
I guess
The
now
way
I
the
know
game
why Mom
shifts
didn't like
between
me playing
styles
with the
keeps you
music
engaged
box.
and constantly surprised. You never know what's coming next, and that unpredictability mirrors the chaos of the Finch family's lives. Barbara's death was very traumatic for the family, especially for her brother Walter, who was so traumatized by the event he never really left the house until the last day of his life. We will see the extent that not only Walter went through to not leave the house, but that Edie went through to help him not leave the house. Because as you saw in her room, and as you heard Edith say, there were stories of a mole man living underneath the Finch family home. This, as you can guess by now, was Walter. And we will see what fear and trauma can truly do to a human being. As we enter the basement, you will see the story
Mom
of
said the
Walter
basement was
Finch.
off limits, unless I wanted another tetanus shot.
Each Finch
I saw
family
Edie
member
sneak down to the basement
that was
once,
born after
carrying
Walter,
packages. I
Barbara,
thought maybe she was hiding presents.
all of them, were told not to enter the basement so that Walter could have his space
turned
and
out
not
she
be
was hiding a lot
disturbed
more than that.
because of his trauma and the fear he felt around other people. But, ladies and gentlemen, this is the story of Walter Finch
remember asking
and how
Mom
trauma
once
can
about where
truly
Walter
affect a
had
human
gone.
being.
She said after Barbara died, he got as far away as he could. If there's a pattern in all these stories, I think it's that none of us has gotten very far.
Goodbye, everyone. I can't believe I've been down here for 30 years. On that first day, after the shaking started, I didn't think I'd survive a week. But after a few days, I settled into a routine. That's what kept me sane. Having a schedule, living for today. I always expected to be dead tomorrow. But if you wait long enough, you get used to anything. Even a monster on the other side of the door starts to feel normal. Almost friendly. And then one day, everything just stopped. Whatever that thing was, it was gone. Maybe it got tired of waiting. Or maybe I just got tired of being afraid. It's been a week now, the longest in 30 years. I'm done waiting. I have to leave while I still can. I know it's out there somewhere. Whatever killed Barbara and Molly and Calvin. Maybe this is all a mistake. But I need to stop living the same day, even if it kills me. Whatever's out there, I want you to know I'm ready for it. I'm going to appreciate all of it, especially the food. I don't mind if I only have a year left, or a month, or a single week. I'd be happy with one new day. I can already imagine the sun on my face.
Walter died when I was 6.
Walter's death shows us why we can't let
believe my
fear
mom
and
never
trauma
told me he
affect
was
our
down
lives. Because if we let it consume us, we let it rule us. And that's not much of a life to live. We see that he didn't have a reason to live, that he expected to just not wake up the next day.
I'm sure my mom was trying to protect me.
But as we follow through the footsteps of Walter, we go down beneath his bunker and exit onto the train tracks where he took his last breath.
Maybe she was afraid I'd end up like Walter. But if she never told me about an uncle under the house, I can only imagine what else she was hiding. I don't want to make the same mistakes she made. Trying to bury something that's still alive. Now that there's only one of us left, or maybe 2, I thought it was time I heard the stories for myself and found out what happened to everyone else. But now I'm worried the stories themselves might be the problem. Maybe we believed so much in a family curse, we made it real.
As you heard Edith say, she's seeing both sides of the Finch family. She's seeing her mom's side, which didn't believe in the curse, wanted to get away from it, and wanted to live their lives.
I don't know if I should even be writing
And
this.
we also see Grandma Edie's side, who believed in the curse, believed in the stories, and saw how...
Maybe
and
it'd be better if
we
all
can
this
basically
died to
see
be.
that Edie's side on how sharing these stories keeps the memories of
But
the
I
family
thought you should
members
know about your
alive,
family.
therefore keeping their spirits alive. But you can also see why all
the
of these
history you're
stories,
a
the
part
telling every generation about the
Though
curse,
to be honest, I feel as
basically
lost
saying
as
that
you
no matter
probably
what you
right
do,
now.
you will die in a bizarre, at times horrific way.
I think the people in these stories
And
believed them.
it
for what
truly
that's worth.
will affect you if you grew up hearing that every family member that you've had has died from some sort of outside force. None of them have died from old age.
And when you look at the house,
But as we start heading
that
back
history of
to the Finch family
imagination and
home,
stubbornness
we will take a
and
shortcut
madness,
through the graveyard.
any of it seems possible.
We will, as you've heard, that before they even finished building their house, the graveyard was finished. Because they had to make a grave marker for Odin Finch. But we see that the Finch family graveyard isn't just home to the family members, it's home to the pets. We also see that the
What kind of
grave
family
markers
finishes
are
building a
very
cemetery
unique
before starting
because
a house?
as you've seen,
It's
that
embarrassing
each
for me
section of
to
the
admit
house and each
this,
room
but
is unique because it was made by Sven
the pet
Finch.
cemetery made me more
The
uncomfortable
graves
than the
were
usual.
designed by Edie Finch.
3 of the gerbils are
Yes,
mine, and
Grandma Edie
2 had been my fault.
made the grave markers for each family member. Some people may
Sven
see
built
this
the house,
as
but it was Edie who
morbid.
designed the cemetery.
Others might see this as a lasting memory of each Finch family member. Because you see, Walter's is the hole in the wall, Barbara's is a star, Calvin's was a ship, Molly's was a cat,
I'm sure Odin's monument
so on and
was
so
Edie's
forth.
idea. My mom was always trying to move
She
on,
probably
but
did
for Edie, the
this
past never
to
went
show
away.
that, yes, while death can be morbid, It can also serve as a marker for each family member.
Her dad had been pretty strict, but it wasn't enough to save her brothers. She was just trying to do better. She lost 2 of her brothers.
You may have
just
seen
like
that
I did.
Milton's
I get why she
grave
tried so
didn't
hard
have
to
a
protect
death
us.
date. That is because
There's so
Milton,
many things I
we're
wish I
not
could
sure
ask
if he
my mom
died.
now.
I will
Part
go
of
over
me
that
thinks
at
this
a
is
later
what she
point in the
wanted all
video,
along.
and I will also
For me to
give
come
it
back
its own
someday.
video, to a degree.
Find
Y-
everything
You'll
out
see in
for
the future.
myself.
But as we climb up this ladder and enter the Finch family home, you will hear a poorly kept secret by me because I kept forgetting to not look down.
But
Edith
looking
isn't
back on it
writing
now,
these down for her. She's writing it down for her baby.
If she told me there
Because
was
she
gonna be
wants
so
to
much
keep her
climbing,
family's memories
I never
alive
would have
and their
come
stories
when I was
alive.
22 weeks pregnant.
But she also wants her child to know what his family was like, so that he can both learn from it and know why he is the last Finch alive. But as we enter, we realize we are in Sam
I never
Finch's
met Grandma
room.
Sam, but
All
I think
grown
he and my
up,
mom had a
Sam
lot
served in the
common.
military, had several kids, and lived a very strict but bountiful life. We'll also see the game's trademarked
They were
unique
both pretty
storytelling,
intense.
because Sam's story is told not through a way you might think. It's told through pictures. And we will also see why Edith Finch's mother was so hesitant for Edith to know the stories. Because
Sam
she
spent his life
herself
shooting photos, but
saw each of her
Mom said he
family
got
members
nervous
pass
being in
away
front of the
and
camera.
die.
I guess we're all afraid of something.
And as I've done before, I will remain quiet so that you can experience the end of Sam Finch.
Dawn, I promise, you'll never forget this weekend.
Yes, sir.
These memories are gonna perfect.
It's gonna rain the whole weekend, isn't it? I will never forget this weekend, Dad.
That's the spirit. Okay, got it.
I'm gonna take some pictures, okay?
Just be careful. That camera's older than you are. Definitely should not have drunk all that coffee.
You're right, Dad. It's starting to clear up. Still freezing, though.
Hey!
That's a keeper.
Nothing quite like being outside. I'm just saying, I'm not always gonna be here, Dawn. You'll need to remember this stuff, if you want to survive.
I'll be fine, Dad. Dad!
Good eyes, Dawn. Before you take the shot, let me get a picture of you.
Dad, I...
Just breathe. Turn off your imagination. Focus on your target. Let me get behind you.
Do I have to do this?
Dawn, you don't have to do anything. But if you want to survive, you'll need to be strong. Great shot, Dawn! I'm proud of you, Dawn. Always remember that, okay?
Dad, it's twitching. I think
That's
it's
totally normal, Dawn. Just focus on the camera. Try not to think about—
Dad!
It's truly tragic once you realize how much death
Of all these stories, that's the one I
Dawn
wish
Finch
most
has
that
seen
my
in
mom
her
had told
life.
me.
She's seen her father, her brothers, her uncles, everybody in her family. She has seen them all die. And unfortunately, as you may have guessed, it didn't only stop at her brothers and uncles. She has seen her children die. And you see why Dawn Finch was so hesitant to share these stories with Edith, because Edith was truly the only family she had left. I'm going to warn everybody now, this next story, you will see the death of a very young child.
After Sam died,
so if you don't want to see this
my mom and
particular
Edie got
story,
really close.
please
They
skip
both
until
lost a
you
lot.
see Gregory. Gregory has a mohawk and has a kite, so this is your final warning. If you do not want to see this story, while it is told in a beautiful way, it may be disturbing for some people.
Dear Kay, do you remember the way Gregory used to laugh when he thought he was alone? Like something funny was happening, but only he could see it.
Time to... Hold on, sweetie. Hello? Sam, I told you I don't want to talk right now.
I wonder what he saw. What his world was like. Everything you could. Maybe if I hadn't called that night.
Damn it. Hold on, I don't want Gregory to hear this.
I wish he'd want you to be happy too.
Gregory's story hit me very hard when I first played through the game.
Love, Sam.
Because, one, it's told through divorce papers, and we are put in the eyes of Gregory Finch in his last moments. His last moments were spent lost in his imagination, full of joy and happiness. But as you've seen so far, the Finch family cannot have happiness for long, because it's always followed up by great tragedy. We'll see another example of this in the next story, where we learn the end of Gus Finch.
Writing poetry, and yet
A poem for Gus, who always said the wedding was a bad idea. Our father never hit us kids, at least not very hard, before the day my brother said with teenage disregard that he'd be dead before he'd see a wedding in our yard. My father made him come, of course, but Gus stood far apart, just flew his kite and bottled up the storm inside his heart. I tried to talk him out of it, but though he'd never met her, we don't need a stepmom, were the words that I
now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride.
When the time for photos came, Dad ordered him to come here. But Gus declined and as a sign held up his middle finger. The wind picked up and panicked geese appeared and quickly went. But all the humans did that day was go inside the tent. The rain came down in buckets then, but no one seemed afraid that nature might destroy the tent our dad had crudely made. The thunder sounded much too close and full of angry power. But all my father said to this was, "Make the music louder." I wish that I could truly say I thought about you on that day. Out there on the beach alone, just you, the wind, the sea and foam. But I didn't, until we found you.
Gus Finch's story is told through a poem by his sister. The poem talks about how Gus was forced to go to his dad's second wedding, and he spent the whole wedding flying his kite. You can truly appreciate the game's sound design in this particular section, because you can hear the sounds of the wedding happening in the background, you can hear conversations, but you can also hear a storm quickly approaching. And unfortunately, this day that was supposed to be happy for the whole family was not happy for long, because Gus was killed by debris that got picked up by the wind, and they didn't find him
at the time, it was as far
until
away
much, much later. As we leave the room, we find Dawn's section of the house, where we see where she met
my dad,
her husband
Sanjay.
and Edith's father, Sanjay. She was part of an organization called Helping Hands, where she was teaching English in India, which is how she met her father.
Religion
Edith's
was
father,
another
that
thing
is.
my mom never talked about, but I think it helped her a lot after her dad died.
Dawn's room can show us that religion can help
My mom moved to
individuals
India
going
a
through
week after
trauma,
graduation and got
loss,
a job teaching English.
and different situations
Louis
such
was
as
born a
this.
year later.
But we end up outside, and we see
When my
more
dad
missing
died,
posters that you may
don't
have
think
seen
Mom
as
knew
we've
where
been
else
going
to
throughout
go.
the house and
I'm sure Edie
the
was
Finch
happy to have
property.
her back.
We see a garden,
The house had to
we
get a
see
little
different
bigger, but
rooms,
Edie was used to that.
then as you'll see in a moment, we see a castle.
And for a while,
because you've heard Edith talk about Milton and how he was an artist and how he drew and sculpted and was very unique in his own way. This is the section I want to go into more detail about, because it is one of the shortest, but it's also surrounded in the most mystery. And as I've done with all the other sections, I will remain quiet so you can hear the music and experience this section on its own. And I will go into more detail after his section.
Milton Finch in The Magic Paintbrush. I was 4 when Milton disappeared.
As you saw, Milton's section was illustrated in a very unique way. His picture is drawn different from everybody else's. It was animated different. The music is different. And that logo on the chair with the crown and the mustache will seem familiar in the next video we'll be doing, called The Unfinished Swan. It is theorized that Milton, from What Remains of Edith Finch, is the king in The Unfinished Swan. I will go over the connections in my next video, but I figured it would be some sort of... It will put some sort of ease in your mind that Milton might not be dead and there might be more than one Finch left out there.
He just spent more and more time in his room.
This next story is the one that hit me the hardest when I first played through this game. And it hits me hard every time I play through this game. If you are in a bad headspace, if you are unhappy at your job to the point you get lost in your imagination, if you have thoughts of ending your own life, please skip this section.
That part of him lived on.
But I will say,
Lewis and I spent a lot of
this
time
next
playing
section
games
shows
together, but
the
he was
pure
surprisingly
genius
bad at them.
of this game.
He died a lot.
It shows how beautiful this game can be and how this game can handle difficult situations, difficult subjects in a beautiful, respectful way. And as I've done for every other story, out of pure respect, I will let you experience
Dear Mrs. Finch, as
this
Lewis's
next section,
psychiatrist,
the
I
story
can
of
understand your
Lewis
desire
Finch.
for an explanation. As I see it, the trouble began in January, shortly after we convinced your son to seek treatment for substance abuse. Newly sober, I believe Lewis first noticed the monotony of his daily life. He kept working at the cannery, but he withdrew part of himself. In our sessions, I saw the same behavior. His mind began to wander. I asked him to describe it. He said he started small, imagining a labyrinth. He'd feel his way about. Then something moved. Bats. And toads. And things that have not names. He knew it was all in his head. took it very seriously. I had hoped he'd find himself. But he found something more. I worried about him then. Daydreaming at the cannery, I spoke with his boss. But he said Lewis had become a model employee. Methodical, tireless, focused. Like a whole new Lewis. So I let him go on. I even encouraged him. It seemed very promising at first. He told me he'd made a new friend. On the edge of a city he named Lewis Topia. He built the city up slowly, brick by brick. Then he made musicians. And songs for them to play. He talked about starting a band. He was always humming something. Every day his imagination grew stronger. He no longer spoke at the cannery. But his chopping was as reliable as ever. Then one day it struck him that all the cheering crowds, even the stones under his feet, were all in his imagination, so he could do whatever he wished. He held an election for mayor, and he won. They begged him to stay, but his mind was already wandering. It became a game for him. He'd conquer a city, then immediately push on. New Louisville. St. Louis. He started drifting away from our reality. Minneapolis, until one day he forgot to go home from the cannery. Even as his mother pleaded with him, part of Lewis kept sailing on. In Lewisburg, he heard rumors of a handsome queen. The queen was on her own quest for sinister serpents. He followed the sound of her electric sitar. His chase led him to a golden palace east of the sun and west of the moon. Even then, his logic remained sound. He knew the world was all in his imagination. But he was so proud of having created it. In his own eyes, he'd become something greater than a king. For someone who'd never known success in the real world, I think it was overwhelming. And then it struck him that the real Lewis was not the one chopping salmon, but the one climbing the steps of a golden palace. My imagination is as real as my body, he told me. It was hard to argue with him. Began to forget the world we know. I think it pained him to remember Lewis, the cannery worker. He began to despise the man with a royal contempt. I still thought I could save him. Even after he said he was being crowned king over all the lands of wonder. The palace would be packed with his companions. Including the wise Calico who'd insisted on advising. His queen waited, holding his crown. There was only one thing left to do. Bend down his head. And the rest I think you know. Mrs. Finch, your son was a kind man who will be missed by all of us who knew him.
The genius of What Remains of Edith Finch lies in how it tells these stories. Each death is recounted through a unique gameplay mechanic that reflects the character's personality or state of mind. Take Lewis's story for instance. He's stuck in a soul-crushing cannery job, but he escapes into a vivid fantasy world. The gameplay has you chopping fish while simultaneously guiding his imaginary self through a kingdom he's created in his mind. It's equal parts mesmerizing and heartbreaking.
On the way back from Lewis's funeral,
Lewis Finch's death hit me like a truck because Lewis was severely depressed and wanted to get away so badly that he imagined a world where he was happy and could explore to his heart's content and could never fail. he wouldn't have to worry about anything, and he could see the world.
But I understand why we
But you
left.
could see how out of hand his imaginary life got when you could see how detailed it got, and reality became Lewis's fantasy. It's hard to tell if Lewis's death was intentional or not, because he was so lost in his imaginary world, who knows if he realized what he was doing. Then there's the other, much more depressing and heartbreaking side, where Lewis knew what was going on, and knew which world he wanted to live in, so he made the choice to leave reality.
But it had to end.
Let me know what you think of his particular story in the comments.
Tell you about that last night.
At its heart, What Remains of Edith Finch is about legacy. It's about the stories we leave behind, because each Finch clings to their own narrative, even if it leads them to their downfall. And as Edith, you're the last one standing trying to make sense of all of it. The game forces you to confront mortality, but it also celebrates life and all its messy, beautiful complexity. It's a reminder that every story matters, even if it ends in tragedy. That's why the game hits you so hard as you see pieces of yourself in these stories and these characters, and leaves you reflecting on your own life long after the credits roll.
Very specific. I left a present for you in the hallway. Why don't you go open it? The grown
And I'm sorry to spoil it, but as I've done before, I'm going to remain quiet so that you can see the ending
I'm not leaving.
of Edie Finch, Dawn Finch, and yes, Edith Finch.
The power had been shut off that morning, but Edie always had plenty of candles. When my mom sealed the library, I don't think she knew about the other entrance. Or that Edie had a key to it.
That thing you're afraid of isn't going to end when you leave the house. Edith has a right to know these stories.
My children are dead because of your stories. I think it's best if Edith and I leave tonight. We'll have the nursing home send a van for you in the morning. Okay?
Dear Edith, there's so many stories I wish I could tell you, but there's only time for one. This is about what happened on the night you were born. That night, the tide went way, way out. It was the first and last time I ever saw the old house aground. There'd been an earthquake out in the middle of the ocean. They called it the lowest tide in 1,000 years. God, it smelled awful. You know, I've seen that house every day of my life. But I never thought I'd go back to it. When the fog rolled in, I lost my way. I got turned around. I started seeing things. Things I'd forgotten had ever existed. But when I saw them, they felt like old friends. That night, a lot of things came back to me. Or maybe I came back to them. Things I can't explain, but that I need you to try and...
Edith, what are you doing in here?
It's mine.
Edith!
Mom, you're gonna rip it! Let go! I kicked and screamed, but Mom dragged me to the car. I never saw Great-Grandma Edie again. The next morning, the van came to pick her up, but she was already gone. After that, we moved around a lot. We both tried to make the best of it. A few years went by. My mom didn't like to talk about it, but she started getting sick a lot. She got better for a while.
Now let's talk about the ending of Edith's journey through the house that ultimately leads to the revelation of her own story and the story of her unborn child.
The last
It's a gut punch of an ending when you realize that she's not writing the story for herself, but she's writing
I
it
found out about you.
for her child to read after she's gone.
I'm still not sure what to tell you.
It's a cyclical tragedy, but also a glimmer of hope that the Finch legacy lives on, and maybe this time it will be different.
But as it is, I think
What Remains of Edith Finch isn't just a game. It's an experience. It's proof that video games can tell stories in a way no other medium can tell. Whether you're here for the narrative, the atmosphere, or just to appreciate its artistry, it's a game that stays with you long after you finish playing it.
But now I hope you'll never see it.
So what are your thoughts on Edith Finch?
I just want to.
What are your thoughts on the Finch family? And do you think the curse is real, or was it all just a string of bad luck and
I
coincidence?
guess if you're reading this now,
Let me know in the comments below.
things didn't work out that way. This is where your story begins. I'm sorry I won't be there to see it. It's a lot to ask, but I don't want you to be sad that I'm gone. I want you to be amazed that any of us ever had a chance to be here at all.
And with that, I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for sticking with me through this journey of the Finch family. Please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Please give me suggestions for any future games that you would like to see. My next video will be the Unfinished Swan. It won't be nearly as long as this one, but I will go into detail about that game as well. So please like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so that you can get more notifications about when I upload videos. And if you feel like seeing more deep dives into games like this, feel free to subscribe. Thank you for watching Crappy Gaming. I will see you guys in the next video. Bye.